Hey YouTube, Melvin Kwangeekeri, and this is a video showing a method of elaborative interrogation more for self-diagnostic purposes. What I mean by that is when you hear a lot of opinions, they are mostly hot takes, especially on social media. And when you are coming up with, when you're thinking about what you actually believe, a lot of times there's not a lot of real searching on where these ideas are coming from. And what often happens is you get these almost like there are really three types that you kind of hit on some issues. The first is the things. I'm just going to call it the thing. I'm talking 1982. This idea seems like your idea, presents itself like your idea, you talk about it like it's your idea, but the minute you sit down and you start thinking about it, you realize this isn't actually your idea. This is coming from some external concept that is masquerading as your opinion. So it's presenting itself as if it's your opinion, but really this is something that you read from somebody on YouTube, and it just sort of took up space there because you had not thought about it seriously. It's when you're thinking about it with your actual thinking. I'm talking type 2 thinking. So there's type 1, which is presenting the appearance, feeling. Obviously, this is from etymology.com or somewhere on Google. And then there's the other one where you're actually putting in significant mental effort, construction, cogitation. So you're actually putting your brain to work in forming this opinion, which is important because it's the difference between internal knowledge of yourself. So knowing yourself, I'm using the Western classical version of knowledge, which is justified true belief. So you have to honestly believe that this is the case, right? It's a belief. So you actually believe it. That's the initial part. The second stage is that it's genuine. So when it's your opinion, so do you know your opinion? Well, what is the justification for that knowledge of the opinion? Hassan said it, or Thinking Critical said it, or somebody I like, Nerd at Newsstand, right? They say something on topic in comics that you don't read about, and you're like, oh, that must be the case. Maybe it is the case, maybe it's not, but you don't until you have that. So you have one, two, or three, so the belief I'm using when someone says belief, it's like that deep, uncertain, and it's very much an emotional sense when I'm talking about it. So I'm talking Germanic truth, which is unshakable faith. So it's like that unshakable belief, like this is true. Like my heart is 100% behind this. Now, whether the facts are there or not is whatever it is. So then you have Veritas and Aletheia, both Latin Greek goddesses of truth. However, the nature of their truth is different. Veritas is mainly about the external world. It's not going into those what do you really think? It's not like that. It's what is the thing in the world, much more practical. So it's that tactile external truth. Aletheia is about the revealing or unforgetting. Lath is the god of forgetfulness. Aletheia is the goddess of unforgetfulness. So you have a revealing style of truth, as in you peel away those immediate sensations, and what's underneath is the aletheia truth, the thing that's behind the thing. So either you've got the external verification or you've got the internal revelation. But what makes knowledge different than justified faith, which is simply orthodoxy, so what separates that from orthodoxy, which is basically the right belief, is the justification. So the justification is some means of, I know this because I verified it directly, or I know this because I interrogated myself and found this to be true. So all of this is just letting you know that that first thing is the thing of how a lot of opinions, mine too, are oftentimes just stuff we got from somewhere else that we've internalized as if it's our own. But when we're actually sitting down and our mind is engaged and we look at things, a lot of those opinions end up basically splitting open and finding all kinds of nastiness behind it. So that's the first issue that is a confrontation when you're trying to learn stuff. The next, let me get my eraser. And this is I'm going to use an example from this movie franchise. So sometimes you have an opinion that isn't really, it's not so much an external, it's a coping mechanism. Now, this type of opinion is, the idea of the Gom Jabbar in Dune is, if you know that your choices are pain for a moment or death rationally, you know that the pain is going to be temporary. However, if you're an animal, you have no sense of time. And the Gom Jabbar test is, you're going to put your hand in a box that's going to put you through undescribable amounts of pain. However, once you take your hand out of the box, that pain is going to go away. If you take the hand out of the box before you're given permission, you die. But if you can keep control of yourself, delay gratification, demonstrate that you can engage in strategic human reasoning, you are effectively a person. In that you can reason. And you can reason in the presence of sensations that would have you simply give in to animal instinct of avoiding pain, even when you know that the consequences are fatal. So the Gom Jabbar is quick, painless death, or a moment of intense pain, and then afterwards, a better life. So this idea is maybe this opinion is something where the facts don't line up. That the way things are going are really bad. Or if I'm being honest about it, I don't think this guy's a good choice, and it's not going to be compensated with, at least it's not this other person. No, like the challenges that you're going to face if this guy's in office are going to be different because he's perceived as being weaker. So if people see a weak person in charge, they're going to become emboldened, then that could make the world worse than if they had at least been perceived as being strong. So just saying, oh, it's going to be better because at least X, Y, Z, or they don't do these things, that's a gam jabbar. You don't want to. You're running away from. You're willing to choose this clearly bad outcome, right? You know the outcome is bad, but if you do it, but at least you don't have to go through the pain with no clear. You don't know when it's going to be over, but you know it's just really bad in the moment. So you have this opinion that you put out there, and it's bullshit. When you're forced to confront it when you're confronting it with evidence, it's not coming from somewhere external. It's something that you're putting up as a coping mechanism for where things really are. So that's two. And then identity. So I don't know when this movie came out. I think it was in the early 2000s. It had John Cusack in it, and I think Amanda Peet. And there's this one phrase that keeps getting said in the movie. I met a man upon the stairs. I met a man who wasn't there. I'll meet him there again today. I wish he'd go away. And the reason for that mantra is the movie is a psychological thriller that presents itself as a horror movie. And the idea is all of these people in the building, that's really a really weird building, and they all have these weird backstories. They're not actually real people. They are they are facets of a serial killer who had tragic backstory, all that. The idea is one of these people is the real person, or will end up resolving as the real person. And they are all basically in this horror movie situation because one of the aspects of this person is the serial killer. And if that version makes it, then they are, because the dude's on death row. But if one of the good personalities is able to integrate and become a functioning person, then he could be put into treatment and eventually he would be rehabilitated, et cetera, et cetera. Now, obviously, it being as it's a horror movie, there's almost always a stinger at the end. This was not any different. But it's that concept that sometimes when you get past that coping belief, or you're just covering up with you're trying to hide the opinion that you have about something from yourself because of some of the social things or whatever. Like, I can't believe I believe this about it. But once you get all these varying all these varying opinions on a question, eventually you're essentially just going to have them fight it out. So the identity is conflicting belief, resolution. All right. So step one, identify the things in the process when you're answering this question of your opinion. So basically, where are these opinions that I have on something that are popping up that aren't mine. And the easiest way of dealing with that is just identify where they're coming from. Like, I don't actually believe this necessarily, but I'm getting it from here. Then you've got those beliefs, those comforting beliefs that you put up to avoid doing real hard thinking. So those are your ganja bars. And what you do is you do the hard thing. You think deeper. And then you get to the identity, where there are these things that, these are just, some of these have some hard implications, and you've got multiple versions, and then you just have to sit there and just until only one is left. Obviously, I could try to paraphrase the litany against fear, but I don't remember it. I just know that wherever the fear has gone, there will be nothing, and only I will remain. It's the idea that you can, fear is usually an emotion, but an emotion is something that makes you do something. With fear, you're either going to confront the source of your fear, or you're going to move away from it. So you're changing your course of action based on the fear, and when you're doing that, it's when you hit the ganja bar. Is that there's some kind of pain point you're avoiding by engaging in, either an avoidance, or you get combative and defensive. So you're going into the threat, like, who the F are you, But when you're doing this by yourself, you're realizing your own conceptions, your own opinions, your own beliefs, and you have to face that down. So with these three, I'm going to go into phase 2, which is using this in, I guess, a paraphrase of elaborative interrogation. So one of the ways you do elaborative interrogation is you try to connect a new idea to what you don't know by asking how and why questions. So I guess the first step would be a thing concept is, how do you know this? How do you believe this? How do you know this? Ganja bars, why do you believe this? So essentially 1 and 2, and you're just gonna keep hammering it out. And when it's something where it's not really meant to be about learning a new concept, but it's also a technique you can use to see what you actually believe about something. And it's essentially how behaving like a child. You just keep asking the why questions, and you eventually get to, the actual thing. But you do want to ask the how, because some of the things that you're answering are not coming from you, and they're coming from somewhere else. So that creates, if you just sit there and take everything at face value, you end up with these cases where you're just getting really defensive, because these ideas are not really yours. These beliefs aren't really coming from you. It's, you were watching a lot of stuff on social media or whatever, and you just want to get that out. And you don't want to accept that you've been indoctrinated. Well, being indoctrinated means you're being taught, and if you've been taught, you're following the path, which is learning. And the only way that you can really learn is if, to some degree, you are being entertained by that process. By entertain, I mean holding among you. So what's entertaining you is holding your time. It's holding you, the entertainer is holding you mentally by keeping you engaged with what they're talking about. And it's only by being entertained in either in the lecture or when you're by yourself studying, and you internalize that and you follow that path, that you're able to learn. And consequently, if the person is really entertaining, they're really able to grab hold of you, they can simply present something in a hot take and you just fold it in. And sometimes there might be a completely different, the definitions for those words might be completely different than what goes on in your head. But you took that soundbite and you internalized that soundbite, and instead of putting it with how they had defined everything, you put your pre-existing concepts into that framework, and you're applying a conclusion that doesn't actually apply, and you're getting things that don't make any sense. And the reason is you bought into a soundbite when what went into forming that soundbite are not actually components that you agree with. But then once you've internalized the soundbite and now you're spouting it back out, you're pumping it full of things that weren't really meant to be there based on the original source. So with that said, a nice light application. So this should be a pretty straightforward question. Who's the main antagonist of Dune 1 and 2? Well, an antagonist is defined as, so notice this is not coming from me. This is coming from some internet search, so you can take that how you want. So the antagonist works against the protagonist. In this case, I mean central protagonist. Okay, so who is the main person in Dune 1 and 2 that is working against the main protagonist? Well, okay, so that's how, so why? So why is the antagonist working? Now, that's not relevant. So let's go further down. Who is the central protagonist of Dune 1 and 2? And what is a protagonist, or a central protagonist? Really, they do three things. One, they move the story. Two, and three. Conflicts with Okay, so three concepts. Obviously, I got these from the internet. So, first is their actions are moving the story forward. Second, characters respond to their actions more than they respond to the actions of other characters. Basically, if you have a central protagonist, they might say 2 or 3 lines to somebody, and that immediately shifts their arc. Whereas somebody can go and just unload a bunch of stuff on them, somebody can just unload a whole bunch of stuff on a protagonist, and the protagonist is just going to go about their day. So essentially, and some antagonists can sit there, give their whole backstory, their whole sob story, whatever it is, why they're doing everything that they're doing, and at the end of the day, the central protagonist is going to go, "That was Tuesday." It's just not going to. They just don't get moved as much by other characters as other characters being moved by them. So the third part, their conflict with the central antagonist is basically how you can determine the true themes of the story overall. So again, these are not things because they're not masquerading as anything else, right? Because I already told you I got these from the internet. You can question the source of it how much you want. But for now, that's what I see it as. So next is, are there any coping systems? Not yet. I don't have a protagonist, right? So we're going to have this, we're going to move to the next stage. So there are three things here that, one, if I'm looking for the antagonist, or better yet, A, who are the antagonists, B, who are the protagonists, and C. Okay. So, what we need to separate are who are your protagonists, who are your antagonists, and who basically out of the list of potential protagonists and your potential antagonists, you kind of can filter out between them, almost like one of those old whodunits where you have a list of statements and you have to solve the logic table. That's kind of where this is going. So the themes are where problem with the theme is something that's only apparent based on what the actual conflicts are. In a child movie, everyone is constantly reinforcing who the antagonists are. You're told in Star Wars, your main antagonist is Darth Vader. We then find out in The Empire Strikes Back, your main antagonist is actually the Emperor, who is Aletheia, revealed to be behind your so-called protagonist, your so-called antagonist. But you realize then that your actual protagonist, the person who is moving the plot ahead, the person who is... So in the first movie, your main protagonist was, whose actions do people respond to more than they respond to other people's actions. So that regard, it becomes, you're in the running with Han Solo. At this point, in Star Wars 1, Luke was definitely not a main protagonist. He did the important thing, but even then, he's not really doing it on his own. He's doing it as an extension of Obi-Wan Kenobi. So in Star Wars 1, Obi-Wan meets all three criteria, because you don't see Darth Vader get shook. Like, everyone identifies Darth Vader as the main antagonist. Like, when you're an 8-year-old today can identify Darth Vader as the main antagonist. But who is the main protagonist? Who is the person that makes this dude flinch? It was not Luke Skywalker. Han Solo scored a hit. So Han Solo was able to best him with the Millennium Falcon. So obviously, like, Han Solo was in the running for the protagonist, but then you're like, he wasn't really responding to Han Solo. So Han Solo didn't get him to respond, but he made him respond at the end, but it's like, don't ignore me. So who got Darth Vader to respond more than they responded to Darth Vader? Only one character did that. That was Obi-Wan. So I'm going to just say, I don't hear a lot of people saying, I don't remember seeing anyone bring up the fact that if you're looking at it from that 3-point framework, that Obi-Wan was the main protagonist of Star Wars 1. To an extent, Han Solo, Han Solo and Princess Leia, you would have to make a decision on which one of them was more of the protagonist in The Empire Strikes Back. Like, Luke is really going through, he's mostly off panel. I think The Empire Strikes Back, you could make the case that it was Han Solo who was the main driving force of the narrative. That people were responding to what he was doing with the Millennium Falcon. Who decided to go to Cloud City? Han Solo. Why did he go to Cloud City? Because his friend was there. So notice that they're responding to Han Solo in The Empire Strikes Back. And the decisions that Han Solo makes and how that backfires is what brings Luke out of hiding to confront Darth Vader before he's ready. So in Star Wars Empire Strikes Back, once again, we see that the Emperor is providing the information for Darth Vader. So Darth Vader is more now a secondary antagonist. and the Emperor is now revealed as the main antagonist in Empire Strikes Back. But you still have that. We don't get the same. We don't have the same through line of who's the driving force of the narrative, because Han Solo was the central protagonist, that whose actions on the guys that we're rooting for was driving the plot forward. It was Han Solo's decisions. Princess Leia was, she was following him. He was the one flying the Millennium Falcon, and so that was driving the narrative. Empire Strikes Back, and everyone else is reacting to it. Then we get to episode three. We get to episode 6, Return of the Jedi, and it is 100%. Luke has finally matured. He is the driving force of that third movie, and wow, is he? So that is the identity. There's not a conflict there, although you could argue that Princess Leia should, in some ways, is a central protagonist, but she's not the ultimate, only because Vader does not respond. The problem is, the issue is you have to have, so while Princess Leia fulfills many of those requirements, she's just not getting the reaction out of the Emperor. She's not getting the reaction out of Darth Vader. And that is, frankly, a disqualifier from being the central protagonist, is that you have to get a response out of the top guys, which might be a reason you could say that you don't really have a central, you might actually say it may be a villain protagonist movie in The Empire Strikes Back, because, so this is the identity test, but this is also Conjure Bar. Notice I'm answering questions about Dune and I'm fixating on Star Wars now. That's a good one. So, identity is when you realize that your framework is allowing multiple conclusions, and then you need to identify how it is that you decide between them. So, who are our antagonists, who are our protagonists, and what are the themes that we can conclude from the conflicts? So I'm going to start with okay. So, with an antagonist, they're mainly defined by acting against the interests of people. I'm going to put yeah. Okay. So first off, Baron Harkonnen and his underlings, the reason I include them is it really just establishes them as not really being there. So you got Baron Harkonnen, he's definitely driving plot, but he consistently causes problems for everybody. And excluding the book, we're just going on the movies, he is important to moving plot ahead. But Fade, he's really good. He can resist impulse. He can control his impulses. Raban, I don't know if he could. Peter DeVries or Vitres, he's only Peter DeMalchian, only in that first movie, and he gets killed, and Harkonnen's able to survive because he has the field and the reports. So he literally just up on the ceiling like a spider. Then you've got Wellington Yue, who's a traitor, but because he wanted to end the torture of his wife. So Baron Harkonnen, he's acting on his own impulses and his own desires, whereas everybody else is kind of trying to do their own thing, but they're not able to get out from under. Next. Emperor Shaddam. Is he? Like, he's got the armory, he has the soldiers, but he has best soldiers. Formerly. Best ships. Most nominal power. Nominal, not real. So, is the Emperor directly stopping the actions of the protagonists? I don't know. He definitely sent his soldiers. For those who watched the first movie, he definitely sent the soldiers. But why did he do that in the first place? Why did he put House Atreides on Dune, and then allow them to be set up to fail, and then use that as a pretense for wiping them out? He's not. So the problem here is that he's not executing his own ideas. That he cared about the Atreides. He knew that the Atreides were loyal, that they instilled loyalty, and he didn't have to worry about Leto Atreides coming after him, even though he talked about how he was ultimately a weak man. But if he was just a weak guy, then he doesn't have to worry about him being a threat. So he responded to that. In a way that's very interesting. Why would he wipe out the entire Atreides family? Then there were also orders to keep Lady Jessica alive, which is something people kind of forget. That in the first movie, Lady Jessica was supposed to be kept alive along with her daughter, who was supposed to be married off to a Harkonnen. And their child would be a male child, and that child would be the Kwisatz Haderach. So now that we see that, Jamis dies in the first movie, so he doesn't get mentioned. He's also almost like a spirit friend for Paul. So now we have, Baron Harkonnen doesn't meet the cut. Shaddam doesn't meet the cut. Who else really functions as an antagonist across both films? why I forgot to put her there. Because she is the one who gave the Gom Jabbar test in the first movie to Paul herself, and she had Lady Fenring give the Gom Jabbar test to Fade, and she recognized that because Fade didn't like being under control of older women, that he would respond most virulently to her trying to give that test, which already just that's something that needs to get elaborated on, because she's antagonistic in the first movie because she's the one who is informing. She informs Baron Harkonnen in the first movie that he's going to get help from the Emperor, and that he can do what he's doing, and then what the constraints are.